If you are a startup looking to grow in Cambridge, the Bradfield Centre offers a range of flexible membership packages which put you in control of your office and home working mix. There's a vibrant, collaborative atmosphere, on-site cafe, plenty of green outside space, and regular member social events. For more information, visit bradfieldcentre.com or call 01223 919 600.
Welcome to the Cambridge Tech Podcast, talking all things technology from the heart of the UK's tech capital. Here are your hosts, Faye Holland and James Parton.
Welcome to the Cambridge Tech Podcast. This week, due to the Easter break, we just have the one news story. Salvatore DiMaggio from KPMG has called the show to tell us all about KPMG's UK Tech Innovator Competition.
Hi Faye, James. This is Salvatore DiMaggio from KPMG. Just want to let you know that applications for KPMG Tech Innovator in the UK competition are closing soon. If you're a fast-growing but ambitious tech scale-up, this is your moment to be seen by industry expert. Expand your network and compete for a place on a global stage in Lisbon. You could be crowned KPMG's Tech Innovator in the UK 2026. But hurry, application closed the 8th of April. See you there.
Thanks, Salvatore. And just as a reminder, if you want to share your news or give us feedback, you can call the show by visiting cambridgetechpodcast.com and clicking on Call the Show. And now, let's meet Tim Ansor of Cambridge Consultants.
So Tim, welcome to Cambridge Tech Podcast. We always like to get to know the guest. So maybe you could introduce yourself and a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. Hello, guys. It's really great to be here. Thank you for inviting me on. So my name's Tim Ansor. I run the Intelligence Services Business Unit at Cambridge Consultants. So that is essentially all about how we put that AI capability into practice and into service for our clients across all the industries we serve to do the thing that Cambridge Consultants does, which is really partnering with some amazing clients who have incredible ambitions to create those new to the world technologies and services to really make a difference in the markets that they work in. So I have an enormous privilege to work with those clients and lead that team.
I mean, what a job that is. Talk about timely and being in the right place at the right time. So how did you get to that role?
I completely agree with you. It's a great privilege for me to be able to lead that team. Been at Cambridge Consultants for about 12 years or so now. Engineering education, as I think a lot of our team are. But coming up through that organisation, working with clients in lots of different sectors, one of the opportunities I had was to work with one of our incredible clients, Ocado, here in the UK, and working with them on that project to think about how do they deliver the next level of automation into their business. So incredible project to work on fully automated robots, warehouses and fulfillment centers. So when you place an order on Ocado, you've got a team of robots going to work in the background to make that happen. And in the process of doing that, really coming to a realization that for those sorts of systems, there's a huge value in the mechanics, but actually there's an enormous amount of value in the intelligence which sits behind the orchestration and the organization of that system. And so when the opportunity presented itself then, segueing over into our emerging AI team to start getting to grips with what they were doing in that space and how we can use that technology to help our clients as well.
Amazing. The whole point of the episode and getting you on today is digging a little bit deeper into these intelligent systems and services that you're working on. I would like to just make sure that everyone understands, first of all, a little bit more about Cambridge Consultants because it's such an integral part of the Cambridge ecosystem. So just tell us a little bit about the company and how it's evolved.
It's a great privilege to be in Cambridge Consultants, who were there right at the beginning, let's say, of the Cambridge cluster. The Cambridge phenomenon is built around the ecosystem that we've got here. And Cambridge Consultants and Cambridge University are identified as really the two founding factors in that ecosystem. And that's because that organisation, our team, is all about, for the last 60 years, putting that first principles thinking that you traditionally got in a university at the disposal of our clients to create those new innovations, those new to the world capabilities. And so now, as I said a minute ago, we have the opportunity to partner with some incredibly ambitious clients in their fields and put our team at their disposal to help them create those incredible innovations. And so that's across many market sectors. The thing we've been doing most recently, most exciting announcement, was our partnership with Lego, which was announced at CES this year, where the Lego Play Labs group have created this Lego Smart Play concept, which we've had such an amazing opportunity to partner with those visionaries to make that real. So we've compressed an enormous amount of technology into that standard Lego brick format. So you now end up with Lego which plays back with you. And that's been an amazing journey. Going back a little bit, we've also had opportunity to work with organizations trying to revolutionize telecoms. How can we deliver 5G signal from drones in the stratosphere? We were able to help that make that a reality. And then clicking back a bit further, partnering with a startup company in the US who had a vision of storing digital data in DNA. And as our test case, we printed Wikipedia into DNA in our test run. So a most amazing collection of capabilities that we get to work on, which are really world-changing. But at the heart of that, of course, is those incredibly ambitious clients that we get to work alongside.
And rolling back over the decades, there are lots of household innovations that people will recognise as well.
One of the best success stories that we've had in terms of creating IP and creating new businesses behind that was the single-chip Bluetooth device, which became Cambridge Silicon Radio, or CSR, as it was latterly known. And that was a world first in being able to get 2.4 gigahertz radio onto a single chip, which is now in everybody's phones and everybody's headsets to make that everyday communication experience that we're all completely used to now. But that originated at Cambridge Consultants. And going back even further than that, the one people love to talk about is the round tea bag for the British audience.
That's the one I was waiting for.
We have to reference that. So that was one of those amazing opportunities where Tetley came to us and they wanted to figure out what can we do to leapfrog our competitors and be number one in the market. And their concept, their idea was we need to create something which everybody remembers. And so the round tea bag concept was born. But the challenge was, how do you manufacture that in the volumes and at the cost point, which means that you can still build a business off the back of it. And so the thing we worked with them on was figuring out how to do that. How do you manufacture a round tea bag at the cost and the speed that you can do a regular square tea bag? And the incredible thing about that story is it literally overnight moved them from number 3 in the market to number 1, which is an amazing story and amazing to be part of that journey.
Fantastic. Thanks for the grounding on Cambridge Consultants, especially for our listeners outside of Cambridge in the UK. But let's jump back to today. You're working in a field called physical AI. So for those hearing that term for the first time, how would you define that and how does that differ from the typical AI applications that most people are familiar with?
Yeah, so just as you say, James, zooming in on some of the work that my team directly are involved in. AI is a very big field and my team are involved in lots of different facets of that. But one of the areas we're particularly interested in right now, as you said, is called physical AI. And over the last, 10, 12 years, we've seen an amazing renaissance in AI since those innovations in deep learning back in kind of 2014 or so. And I would say at that point, we heralded in an area where there was a lot of focus on using AI for perception tasks. How do you get AI to recognize objects, classify objects in images and sounds? We then moved into a period of what we refer to as generative AI. So large language models, image-based creation. So you've got AI, which is creating new text and new images on prompt. I guess in the last maybe 2 years or so, we've seen a rise of what's called agentic AI, which is where you take those large language models and you give them agency. You allow them to have access to tools and data, and they can take actions on their own. And we're seeing those start to come through to make amazing transformations in back office processes and workflow and software coding and a whole range of different areas. But then coming on the back of that, the area which I'm really seeing a lot of energy and focus in the last 12, 18 months or so is physical AI. And what physical AI is, it's the branch of AI which is starting to give machines an appreciation of the real physical world. Because the large language models, the ChatGPTs, the Claudes, etc., are trained on data and text, and so they understand how to manipulate words and images really effectively. But their appreciation of the physical world is much more limited. And so physical AI is about giving AI that understanding. It's about understanding that objects may still exist even if you can't see them. It's about understanding that some objects are squashy and some are hard. It's about understanding that if you drop something, it will fall to the ground. So all of these concepts that as human children you adopt and you start to appreciate in the first early years of life because of your ability to interact with the real world. But AI systems don't have that ability. So we've got to work out how to teach them those concepts. And that's what physical AI is all about.
And then you also bring in the humanoid robots. elements of it, which we're going to talk about a little bit more as well. I think we've all seen the films. What's changed to now make it more of a reality? Are things actually genuinely difficult? It's the fact that we've got physical AI and we can start working on it. Is that making it more realistic?
No, it definitely is. I would say the combination of that evolution of AI into physical AI that I just touched on, in combination with the amazing evolution in mechanics, electric motors, battery technologies, sensor technologies, the combination of those two is meaning that we're seeing an amazing resurgence in physical robots. And as you've said, the form factor, which captures everybody's imagination the most, is the humanoid. But I also think there's a value in that form factor because it's a class of general purpose robots. And not all of these necessarily have to have 2 arms and 2 legs. There's a variety of different forms which may have kind of wheels or legs or variety of arms. But the class of robot that we're talking about is a general purpose one. So rather than a machine which does the same thing all day, every day, we're creating machines which are flexible enough to do a couple of things. So bothly operate in the same space that humans are in, which is why humanoids are attractive, because we've built spaces with doors and stairs and those kind of obstacles to navigate. But also they're able to do a variety of different tasks. So rather than having to do the same task all day, every day, 24/7, they can do very much different tasks and they can do the same kind of tasks that humans do. And that capability is very much being enabled today by, as I say, this combination of physical AI evolution and the capabilities of hardware and software to be able to make physical robots effectively.
So you mentioned Ocado in your introduction, but give us a flavour of the kinds of industries that you're seeing lead in this space, the kinds of use cases. Is that manufacturing, logistics, healthcare? What else are you seeing?
Yeah, I think, as you can imagine, the drivers for these kind of technologies are associated with labour shortages and cost pressures in many cases. So the organisations who are really pushing hardest to adopt these next generation automation technologies are in logistics, they are in manufacturing, a variety of different industries. Healthcare, yes, but I wouldn't necessarily imagine that a humanoid form factor is going to see use case in healthcare in the near term. But we talk with manufacturing and logistics companies a lot. And we can see that with the geopolitics pushing for manufacturing to be rehomed in many cases into some of the developed countries in North America and Europe. And with the labour shortages in some of those industries, there is a real need, which is not just about cost, actually. It's about, can we keep the lights on and keep the business going, to find new ways of getting work done and moving products around. I saw a stat the other day which says there are over 1 million unfulfilled vacancies in the US logistics industry. And having been around some of those facilities, it's hard work. And they're asking people to go and spend long hours in the back of trailers in hot and cold and continually physical labour, which is quite difficult to attract people to go and do that work. There are many use cases in those industries where these next generation of robotics and automation has a really strong opportunity to play a role.
And I think that's infinitely logical, isn't it? It's all about improving processes, optimizing all of those kinds of things. But what about the new capabilities that robotics could potentially unlock?
Yeah, really good question. I think there are an awful lot of cases, as you said, which is just about, can we get this work done? But because we have the flexibility to build any form factor that we choose, we can decide to rely on the capability of engineering to do two different things. I mean, if you saw recently, there was an announcement or a release of Boston Dynamics' new Atlas robot, which was shown off at CES in January. And there they were making exactly that point, that actually they'd designed the robot to be able to do things that humans couldn't. So it can twist its head 360 degrees or it can twist its body 360 degrees. And those are small things, but you can see how by building up on some of those innovations, you could allow a robot to act more efficiently, more quickly, get jobs done faster than a human could. Now, obviously, at the obvious end, we could just build a bigger machine, which is capable of lifting and moving around larger objects. But equally, you can get into the realm of different sensor types. So actually, the robot can perceive things that humans can't. They can potentially move faster. They're stronger, as I said. So we can bring to bear all of these different capabilities. But the key question is always, what's the problem we're trying to solve? And there is a spread between the industrial robot arms that we've seen in practice for many years, who bring to bear those skills. They are extremely strong. They can lift very heavy weights. They can move very fast. But they don't bring to bear these kind of new physical AI capabilities. But if we're looking for a generalized robot, we need to identify what are the use cases we're trying to attack to bring these novel capabilities to bear, over and above the fact that we just have this automation platform which can essentially do most things that a human can do.
It's not directly linked to that last answer, but we went to the Form the Future conference a few weeks ago and talking about the impact of AI on future jobs and stuff like that. What kind of new jobs is a move towards automation going to create? If you're in education right now, or you've got children that are coming through the educational process, what should you be thinking about in terms of future jobs and the skills you're going to need?
I don't think an answer to that is any different to the traditional AI debate. We can see that AI in general is going to have a significant impact on society. And so thinking about how do you get yourself in a position where you're familiar with the use of AI tools, but also where you're familiar with some of the softer side of dealing with people, critical thinking, those kind of tasks which allow any individual to navigate the world of work in a way which doesn't rely on doing continual repetitive tasks, because those are the ones which we anticipate that AI is going to focus on first.
One thing I was curious around is you talk about humanoid form factors. You must have done a lot of research around the psychology of bringing robots into workplaces. So what kind of feedback are you getting from employers or staff, or the strategy behind how companies transition towards this kind of new way of working?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting point. And actually, you are 100% right that question about how do we create a robot which interacts with a human or human collaborators or partners or colleagues in an effective way is such an important topic. And so for the last several years, the Cambridge Consultants team have built a specific dedicated team looking at psychology and AI and how we blend those topics together, which we call the Human Machine Understanding team. And in the research we've been doing, we've very deliberately been looking at how we can make robots interact with humans in as acceptable way as possible, but also in a way which allows them to operate as a member of the team. So there's a couple of facets to that. One is just how does the robot present itself? So we've got opportunity to play with facial expressions, facial features, gestures. How does the robot express itself, for want of a better phrase, in a way which is understandable to the people who are around it? But then secondly, how do we get a robot to understand the context of what a human is saying to them is challenging, because we don't interact with each other in very software scripts-like language. We're ambiguous and we use gestures and we use idioms and the language is complex. So thinking about how do you program a robot to understand that? If someone gives it the instruction, can you take that thing from there to over there, please? It's able to interpret that by a combination of interpreting someone's gestures, interpreting their language in an abstract way, and understanding the references which are being made to different objects in the room. And so this is a whole area of research that we're putting quite a bit of effort into, because we understand that with all of the underpinning developments of physical AI and robots that we just talked about, to actually deploy them into service and get them to be usable and accepted alongside humans, this is going to be an absolutely critical part of that picture that we have to solve.
I think that's really important, because obviously I guess the fundamental reason Cambridge Consultants has been so successful over the years is it's not just the technology, is it? It's the implications, it's the adoption, it's the piece that surrounds that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to understand, working backwards from in the future, how do we deploy this innovation and have the impact that we and our clients want to have? And then working back from that, what are all the problems we have to solve? And there are many, which include how do you get the cost point to be right so that actually economically it makes sense? How do you get people to interact and accept the technology, as we just talked about? And technology acceptance is a very broad topic beyond just AI and robotics. We have to think about the safety case. So we have to think about, if you're going to put robots in a place alongside humans, how do you assure their safety? Because we're putting reasonably high-powered devices to give them the ability to do the work we want them to do. They have to be powerful. So how do we make sure that they're safe as well? So there's a whole number of layers of challenges that we have to address, not just the fundamental technology.
I think there's also another level that we should bring in here, which is the challenge around data. So there's so much data that's out there or that's needed for the training models as well. How do you know that what you're putting together is actually the right kind of data? How are you managing that whole problem?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Actually, let's unpack that for a minute, because what I just skipped over glibly in answering James's last question about the layers of impact and cost and safety and what have you, is that we need to get the robots to perform accurately in terms of moving around physical space and manipulating of objects. The training data for the robots and for physical AI systems to do that is much more difficult to come by than what we're used to in terms of training large language models and chatbots. Because the ChatGPTs and the Claudes of the world were trained on all of the content which is stored in the internet in terms of text and image And so there's a vast amount of data which was available to those organizations training those models. And that led to the very, very rapid rise in the performance of the models and also the size of them. Now, the training data we're talking about when working out how do you train a robot is the description of how should it move each of the individual joints of its arms and fingers in order to reach out and grab the coffee cup like the one I have in front of me here. There isn't a set of data which describes that movement in the same way that there is data which describes text and an image that there is on the data on the internet. And so one of the challenges of the advancement of physical AI is exactly as you said, Faye, it's where do the leaders in this industry get that data in enough volume to allow them to train the robots to be accurate and fast and reliable? And so one of the challenges that we, like the rest of the sector, are grappling with is how do you do that? And there are a number of approaches which many people are leaning towards. First of all is simulation, because we can create digital representations of the world which allow us to play through iterations and options and scenarios and collect information about the movement of the robots in those virtual spaces. And we're doing that, and we use those to be able to do the first pass, if you like, of collecting and creating training data. The other way that which we're using is getting the robot to move, usually through a process of essentially remote control. We use a fancy term called teleoperation, which is essentially you're operating the robot from remotely. But you're moving the robot in physical space, but completely controlled by a human. And in so doing, you can capture all the data about how it moves its joints in order to achieve a certain task. And so we've got a couple of ways that we've got to do that in our labs. One is we've got a motion capture rig, which is very much like you will have seen in the creation of movies, where you've got people moving around and you create virtual avatars in a movie because you capture their movements in a separate space. So we can rig up our team to move in that physical space and have the robot in real time copying their movements as it stands right by them. And so as the robot does that, we can capture the way it's moving in order to perform a task that we want it to do. The other thing you can do, you can put a virtual reality headset on and you can control the robot the same way using that mechanism. So both of those simulation and teleoperation approaches are being used by players in the industry at the moment to collect that training data to allow them to train the robots to do what they need to do. Now, through our experimentation, we found that the data pipeline we've built means that we can train a task teleoperation, and in about 24 hours, let's say, we can collect enough data for a specific task to train the robot to do it again, which is great. So that's a really fast turnaround. And I think that kind of capability is going to be needed by any organization which wants to put a robot into practice for a specific use case in their sector. Data is definitely one of those topics which we are grappling with in order to help people in the sector get ahead with what they're trying to do.
Technology moves fast, and now so can you. Discover Polestar, the all-electric performance brand vehicles redefining how we drive. Precision engineering, minimalist design, and software that evolves with you. Experience it at Holden Group in Norwich and Bury St Edmunds, or let us bring the test drive to your door. Proud sponsors of the Cambridge Tech Podcast. Polestar, electric performance redefined. Discover at holdengroup.co.uk/Polestar.
Listening to you describe that, I'm curious how you think about working for individual clients to give them competitive advantage versus foundational insights and breakthroughs, which might be appropriate at things like industry standard bodies or somewhere that you can roll out progress for an entire industry rather than it being proprietary for one client. You must work in both fields because obviously you reference things like your Bluetooth work and stuff like that. And obviously telecoms has had huge success by going through industry standard approaches. How do you think about those kinds of proprietary for clients versus industry?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great question. And it is one we definitely grapple with on a periodic basis. The approach we take is to work out how do we help our clients to innovate within an industry body structure. And of course, we can recommend, we do on a regular basis, respond to consultations from regulators about how they see the technology evolving in their market. And therefore, as a regulator, as an industry standard setting body, what they should do about it. We don't usually have a particular position we want to portray. We don't usually have a particular view which says, we think it should be this way. We'll continue to contribute to the debate, of course. But actually, usually in the setting of those standards, there are multiple different approaches which can be brought to bear to solve a certain problem. And there'll be multiple players in the industry who each have an opinion on how they think that standard should pan out. And we aim to maintain a position of independence in those discussions rather than saying we think it should be this way. And so far, for the last 60 years, that's felt like a good position for us to take. In the example of Bluetooth and all the work we do in telecoms, we're trying to work out how do we help our clients to innovate and do something unique within the context of the standards, but also recognizing that they will evolve. And so as we understand what will become capable, what will become possible as technology evolves, we can contribute to the debate around the industry standards. But we don't tend to push a particular objective, if you like, of where we think that the standards should evolve. We just advise and maintain a position of independence on it.
Which is probably a very sound way of doing it, isn't it? Just one last question on the data side before we move on. How much do you think that the scarcity of data is going to limit or slow down deployment and adoption?
It depends a little bit on what our reference point is. So I think it will be a limiting factor to the speed of deployment and adoption, but it depends on relative to what. So we're definitely going to see deployment and capability evolution at a slower rate than we saw for large language models, because the volume of data is just not the same. But that said, it will not necessarily stop the beginnings of the deployment and adoption, because there's such a direct economic benefit to getting these robots and machines into service that I think we will see people trying to crack specific use cases where we can see that those robot systems are able to deliver benefits. And from there, we'll start building out. At the same time, the effort going into simulation really shouldn't be underestimated. The quality and fidelity of those simulations to collect that data is really quite impressive. And the topic we're grappling with now, as are others in the industry, is what is the right fidelity and accuracy of that simulation to describe the world as accurately as we can, and therefore minimize what's called the sim to real gap, the difference between your simulator and what the robot experiences in the real world. How do we simulate in the best fidelity we can to justify the performance we achieve with the compute power we have available? But given the available compute, I think that topic of simulation and our ability to use simulation to solve this problem, I think will be also one of the unblockers. Just summarize, it'll be two parts. It'll be the advancement of simulation and getting robots into early use cases, which will help create that data flywheel, as it's called. If you can get robots into service and doing stuff, that allows you to collect data to train the next generation of robots to do it better. As we see that flywheel starting, I think we'll start to see adoption really ticking up. And there are different opinions. I think we'll start to see commercial deployments for these general purpose robots in the next 2 or 3 years. And I think it'll only accelerate from there.
I just wanted to drill a little bit deeper into how you approach problem spaces, especially new lines of business, I guess, because you mentioned, for example, you just invested in the motion capture capability and the teleoperation pipelines. That must be a substantial investment. Are you making speculative investments in advance of predicting demand from clients, or is it more reactive when you actually get a client come to you and declare that they're interested in exploring these kinds of fields?
It's a bit of both. We definitely have to do the former. Because we are helping our clients to create the new and the next and never been done before, we have to be able to be ahead of where technology is going. And so that means we have to be scanning the horizons, we have to understand what's coming next, and we have to blend our technical understanding with the market insights we have from working with our clients day to day to make that judgment of what do we think are the next topics that we need to put some focus on. And physical AI has been one of those. And as a result of that, we've spent over the course of last year investing for ourselves to build a capability so that we're ready to be able to help the organizations who are trying to get ahead in this market to get there first and to achieve the best performance that they can. It's something we continually do. And if you look back through Cambridge Consultants' history, there have been strands of business that we've built off the back of semiconductor, radio technologies, optics and lasers, biology and protein design. And there's a number of these layers which we can point to, which we identified were going to be transformative platform technologies in the market. And so we invested in them to make sure we've got the capability to help our clients in those areas.
We had a very good conversation there around the kind of the research philosophy and how you think about these kinds of challenges. And you've mentioned some kind of customers in the conversation today, but could you bring to life for us, where are we on the adoption curve? And what are some of those near-term, real cutting-edge kind of case studies of using robots, either in industrial or other settings, that maybe we haven't come across in the mainstream media that would surprise people maybe?
Yeah, no, it's a really important topic because I think the gauging where we are in the uptake clearly requires us to look at what's happening in the market outside. So a few things to point on. So there's a number, as you can imagine, there's a number of analyst forecasts and projections about the potential size of the market, which go even up to $5 trillion in 2050, which is obviously a way out. And there's a number of different projections which are not quite as high as that, but nevertheless, the expectation is the market's going to be significant. Today, we're seeing changes in the market which both allow robots to demonstrate their capabilities. So increasing number of games, tournaments, robot Olympics, robots taking part in half marathons. So there's a lot of events being put on to demonstrate and test and prove out robotics for real world deployments. And then we can see the boom, if you like, in particularly the humanoid robot, both startup but also industrial players entering into the space because they all can see that the potential opportunity there. There are many, I would say, emerging humanoid robot startups, quite a lot of them either US or China-based, but we are seeing some European players entering the market as well. There's an organisation called Humanoid in London here, but a number of others. This week, we had Elon Musk talking about what he's going to do with the Tesla company and talking about shutting down manufacturing lines for their cars so they can make more space to build their humanoid robot platforms. And we see conversations with a number of other players who aren't yet public on the market in terms of their intents around humanoid robots, but we know that they have programs going on behind the scenes to try and build technology in this space. So we can see a lot of the industry gearing up to respond to the needs, because I think everyone sees the need. I think then the question is, okay, so how real is it that we're seeing deployments happening in for real at the moment? I would say probably one of the most high-profile, real practical deployments we've seen was with a startup in the US called Figure AI, who put their humanoid robots into BMW's factories in the US. We can't quite tell from the outside exactly how successful that trial was, but it's stopped now, and you can see that they've stopped it, but Figure are making a big deal about the success of it. So we can see that these trials are actively happening and people are putting these humanoid robots into service. Now, I think back to the point I made earlier, it's not yet clear that a bipedal robot is necessarily the solution for all use cases. There are a range of different form factors, and we're seeing people experiment with other form factors. Mobile manipulators is one phrase where it's actually a wheel-mounted robot, but with arms on. We're starting to see people experiment with those. We're, of course, seeing a significant interest in the quadruped, the dog-style robot. Those are interesting because they are for an inspection use case more so than a manipulation use case, I would say. So that essentially means we're using the robot to collect data about the world as opposed to influencing and interacting with the world. That is an easier problem. And so I suspect that we will see more mass deployments of that use case sooner. And we're starting to see people solving the problem of how do you get them to charge themselves, and so you don't need constant human intervention. So we're seeing all of the pieces, I would say, come into place to allow these larger scale deployments. Most organizations I'm aware of are still in the trial stage. So there aren't any significant, that I'm aware, not any significant commercial deployments of these kind of next generation robots. But there are a lot of experimentations and trials and learnings, therefore, going on all over the world.
I think, Tim, there's so many really good use cases that you've given us there. They're highly relevant use cases, but if you look at the normal media and what the mass population are actually watching, it is those that are running the marathons or having boxing matches or doing cartwheels. And I'm just interested to know, how much do you think that's a good thing because it's getting the awareness out there, or how much is it a bad thing because then you get onto the psychological, social issues of having robots? So do you think it's a good thing that we are hyping the market up a little bit and telling those quirky stories as opposed to the more robust use cases examples that you've just given?
It's a slightly subtle answer, but overall, the fact those events are happening is a good thing. The tipping point where I think it becomes not helpful is if we represent that those events are fully autonomous robots delivering what you're seeing on the screen, because the reality is it's not. So at the moment, and this will be an emerging picture, this will be a changing picture, but to date, all of the events that people have seen on screens of running marathons or boxing matches or many of the competitive sports, in many cases, those will have been human piloted robots. They're not autonomous. They're just being driven by remote control. And so I think that those events are really helpful for those engineering teams to test out their innovations, test out the robot platform they've built, to collect data as we discussed earlier, about the robot doing something for real. But the danger we have is if the public perceive those to be fully autonomous robots just doing this thing on their own with the same kind of intent and capability as humans, I think we're in danger of giving a misleading picture. And so I think the challenge for the industry at the moment and the media is to make sure that when we portray robot achievements, we're being clear about, is this a robot doing all of the things you can see on the screen completely under its own autonomy? Or is it something which actually there's a human puppeteer behind the scenes who's actually driving the robot? And if we can get that position and clarity on that question right, I think we will end up with both the engineering teams having the ability to test their craft and test the innovations that they built, which is great. But also we'll make sure that the public at large and society understands the speed of development of this area.
Tim, we both saw you at the 55th Science Park celebratory event where you were presenting. And one of the things that really struck me, and I think we actually talked about this on the podcast that preceded the event, was you made this comment around future managers are going to have to be adept at not only managing people, but they're going to have robots and AI in their team. So I guess that kind of goes back a little bit to the psychology side of the conversation. But could you just expand on that thought and maybe give listeners that didn't have the advantage of being in the room that night a little bit of your take on that?
Yeah, sure. No, and by the way, I should say the Science Park event was a lovely celebration. I think Cambridge Consultants is now the oldest or the longest serving tenant on the Science Park. So it's been amazing to see the ecosystem grow around us. But on that point, I think it's a really important topic for us all to be thinking about that over the coming years, and not just physical AI, but AI in general, we will inevitably have to take a role where each of us as a human doing the job that we do will not only be surrounded by human colleagues, but we're going to be surrounded and interacting with AI-based colleagues as well. And this is the agentic systems, which I was referring to earlier, which we're already seeing today, that I go and talk to some of my colleagues about tasks that they're doing, and they come back to me and say, hey, okay, I'm doing that task, and what I've done is I've set off some Google Deep Research agents to go and do some research for me, and they've produced this report, and this is the conclusion that we've reached from summarizing the report that my agents have produced for me. So today, we're seeing that kind of interaction in our workspaces. And that is just the beginning. It will only continue from here. And so I would say that all of us need to start becoming familiar with how we operate on a day-to-day basis with these emerging AI systems, because we will be relying on them increasingly to do elements of our work for us. And that's not to say that we will ever replace our human colleagues entirely. I mean, I don't believe in that for 1 minute. But I think we will inevitably see that as you progress in your career, the ability to both manage human colleagues and human team members, and not only for you to operate individually through AI systems, but also to help your own team to operate and be fluent in operating with AI systems, is going to become an increasing important part of the skills we all need to develop.
And how do you think society adapts to that? The time of everything is getting condensed so quickly, isn't it? I mean, there's been decades-long conversations about STEM skills in schools and do people need to learn how to code? And now we've moved to no code and low code, and now you're getting co-pilots that can code for you. So all of these things, education takes a long time to fall into line and to train out the teachers to teach the children. How do we keep up with this? What conversations are happening at a government level to try and figure this stuff out?
From a certain perspective, AI is another technology revolution in that we're right now at the stage where it's a bit raw. It's a little bit ropey in some cases in terms of the quality of output that it produces. And so to be really good at using these tools, you have to understand how it works under the hood to get the best out of it. But in the same way as we've all adapted to the technologies around us, mobile computing, the internet, there's a whole range of technologies which we now take for granted. But many people don't know how it works under the hood. They're just familiar with how to use it. And I think we will inevitably see that evolving. And so there will be organizations who come to market who provide these agentic systems in such a way that they're reliable. You don't have to understand how it works. It just allows you to get your work done better. That will happen, but we're just on that transition point right now where it still looks a little bit raw and a little bit like you need a PhD in computer science to figure out how to make it work. That period will pass. But I think, as we touched on before, the transition to AI is also different in that it's not necessarily just a tool, because we have to be conscious about the degree of agency and the degree of autonomy we give to these AI systems to make sure that we understand what the bounds of their operations are. And I think that, for me, is where we need to be focusing on educating people, helping them to understand that we have that autonomy. As we're building these AI systems, it's entirely down to the control and the decisions made by their human creators as to the bounds of autonomy and agency that they have. And we have to understand that that's a control that we have. And everybody who's going to start using these agentic systems needs to understand the bounds of their capability, what they're good for, what they're not good for, and how you put those systems together to create an agentic team alongside your human team.
So, Tim, thank you. Really insightful conversation. We talked right at the top of the episode about Cambridge Consultants and its role at that intersection between research and industry, which I think we've gone through beautifully throughout the episode. What I would like to ask as my final question is about what kind of prevalence you think Cambridge, the location, will have in the physical AI space. We've become world leaders in life sciences, biotech, deep tech, quantum. Do you think that we're about to do the same kind of thing with physical AI?
Yeah, it's a really good question. There are some really great pockets of capability around Cambridge. I would like to say my team is one of those. The Cambridge University has a great robotics lab alongside its computer science department. We've got organisations like Cambridge Medical Robotics who are on our doorstep here as well. So we've got a number of the different pieces, if you like, which could allow us to build a really strong position in the world of physical AI. At the moment, there isn't that kind of point of coalescence to build something specifically focused on physical AI in Cambridge. But I think, who knows, this year might be the year that we start pulling the threads together to make something, because we've got all of the ingredients here in Cambridge. We just need to figure out, is this something that we as an ecosystem really wanted to collectively put our effort behind? I think the opportunity is definitely there and we have the ingredients. We just need to put our heads together to figure out, are we going to make something big in Cambridge on this topic?
Right. And if anyone can do it, we can.
Absolutely.
Tim, thanks so much. It was a really interesting conversation and we're definitely going to get you back on for more. I'd love to talk more about the Lego as well at some point.
Thank you, guys. I've really enjoyed it.
Today's show was produced by Joe Donaghy of Cambridge TV and supported by our media partner Business Weekly. The Cambridge Tech Podcast is available on all major podcast platforms and on cambridgetechpodcast.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. It'll really help others discover the show.